everyone. On behalf of the Seattle Asian American Film Festival, I would like to welcome some of the filmmakers from our Family Portraits program. Thank you so much for sharing your films and for joining us for conversation. So I'll ask everyone to just go around and share with us your name, the film that you worked on, and then where you're joining from. And while everyone is just thinking for a moment, I can start. My name is Yaoyao. I'm the volunteer manager at SAAFF, and I'm calling in from Seattle. And feel free, anyone, to kind of jump in and go ahead.
Hi, my name is Osric Chow. I was the writer and director on Good News, and I'm joining in from Vancouver, BC.
Hi, I'm Johnson Chang. I was the writer-director for Lonely Blue Night, and I'm calling in from the San Gabriel Valley in the LA area.
Hey everybody, my name is David Liu, and I directed the film The Children, and I'm calling in from the LA area, specifically the Crescenta Valley.
Great, thanks so much for going around. And I have a few questions just prepared for everyone, but please feel free to jump in, ask each other questions. If a question doesn't exactly apply, feel free to just give a response or anything that's coming to mind. And so the first is, if everyone might be able to go around again, just share a little bit about what inspired you to make this film, or how you kind of got involved with the story.
Okay, I guess I'll start again. I'm an actor predominantly. I've always had an interest behind the camera, and that was usually in the producing sphere. I wanted to do things as a vehicle for me to perform. But I got an email from my agent one day asking me for a director's reel, and I'm like, I don't direct. I produce, maybe write, but like directing has never been a thing. I'm like, why are you even asking that? And he apologized, and then maybe 2 days later, I was just thinking about that. I'm like, what a strange question. Why don't I have a director's reel? And then I just started thinking of ideas that I had, and I always had this idea of this bittersweet ending that it was just the idea of a bittersweet ending, like nothing beyond that I just loved a lot, and it just kind of manifested into the short that Good News is, and it just started from that moment at the end, and then I just kind of worked my way backwards to the beginning and put it together.
Yeah, Oscar, thanks so much for sharing. And could you speak a little bit more to kind of that jump from mainly producing and acting into the directing sphere? Maybe any new muscles you're using there?
Well, I mean, a lot of new realizations as I jumped into this. One, originally I had every intention of acting in it regardless. And so there's a big decision. I'm like, do I act and direct? And then at one point I'm like, no, I just need to focus on one thing. And directing is probably a pretty big job that I don't really understand. And I think my first big realization was just how valuable good actors can be. I'd never really, being an actor for most of my life, I never really valued actors, weirdly enough. And then needing to find good actors, all of a sudden, oh my God, when they're good, your job's done. It's just so easy. Thankfully, I had some really good actors that are friends that were able to just slot in. But it was still quite a thing to work with, a lot of people who had never acted, didn't even understand film.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly realized that I knew a lot more than I thought I did, which was a lovely surprise. And I think I learned how to appreciate directors in a way that I never was before either. Because for the most part, you just see crews working their asses off and the director's just sitting behind a chair. And then, being in that chair now, I'm like, wow, I get it. I can look like shit and still show up, and that's fine. But there's this incredible burden of responsibility on my shoulders now that is invisible. And I never experienced that until that first day. And okay, if we don't get this day, that is going to cost this much money. That is going to cost this many people's time, and it's going to be my fault. Right. So I think that burden of responsibility was very heavy, and certainly allowed me to appreciate good directors when I now see them, because before I was certainly taking them for granted.
Yeah, thanks so much for your response. And then Johnson or David want to speak to the inspiration behind your projects.
No. Yeah, I'll go. So yeah, my project's called The Children, and it's a two-part double bill, I should call it, about two sets of siblings who are coming to terms with the loss of a parent in the city of LA. And I actually I've always wanted to make films about like specifically the city of LA, because not only growing up in the vicinity, I just think it's an underrated location for a lot of reasons. I mean, there's a lot of history to it. There's a lot of the nooks and crannies of it that a lot of like culturally, a lot of people don't really like talk about. They focus on sort of like the glitz and glamour. But I find LA a fascinating city in its own way, especially as it relates to folks who have moved here recently or like are raising their families here. This is just a city where so many people have traversed and still traverse it day to day. And I made the first part of the film, Angel's Landing, for a fellowship called Armed to the Camera for visual communications. So that was a great time. Got to really get close to VC, which is a great organization, for AAPI folks. And the second part, called River, I made for a fellowship called the Freeze Endeavor Fellowship. It's sort of like a relatively new directing fellowship sponsored by Endeavor Content. That's the prompt was to sort of tell a story about the city, specifically as it pertains to water. So a lot of the folks in our fellowship ended up making films about the ocean, because obviously it's right there, about 10 miles away. But the LA River has always fascinated me. I sometimes we take walks around there, and it's just this urban river. It's an industrial river that I think just carries a lot of mystery to it and a lot of clarity at the same time. So
yeah, so interesting to hear about kind of this perspective on like the places in LA you don't really think about when you think about the city. I've personally never been there, and I think the setting for the second part of your film, it's a little bit even surprising for me to realize oh, that's also in LA as well. And with the water theme on top of that, really brings more perspective there. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And then Johnson, would you like to talk a little bit about your film?
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about LA and places that aren't really represented within the LA area, because my short, so it's set in a Chinese seafood dim sum restaurant in the San Gabriel Valley. It's a place that I actually grew up going to. And actually David's also from the SGV, right? I know David. So I think we have a lot of love for this place. And when you do meet someone else from here, I think there's an instant connection. You kind of have this shared history of understanding the specific culture of a place, and all these restaurants, and how that experience is going in, and then feeling there's a place where you can kind of be Chinese for a specific kind of period of time, and all the little rituals and customs that happen over a dinner. I always found those family dinners, especially when they were mixed with business, to kind of be this really interesting, dramatic kind of setting where the stakes are kind of incredibly high for people, and showing face and saving face, and people kind of showing off, but also these little side conversations. Some people, my dad would be making some business deal with someone. My mom would be trying to make sure everybody knew how well we were doing, while also trying to be humble about it. People would be fighting over the check, ordering stuff, pouring each other shots, trying to figure out how much to drink, how much not to drink, what to say yes to. And I just found them so pressured, and just it felt like a great vehicle for I don't know, just these little crumbs of dramatic irony. And and for me, my goal has been to I think a lot about the process now. For me, I was inspired by what kind of filmmaker I want to be, and a lot of the kind of filmmaker I want to be is kind of circled around locations and memories, and being inspired by a place, and kind of planting my flag in a place and then growing with it. And for me, the San Gabriel Valley was that place. So this is one of a couple of shorts that I've started to make here. I made another one like just like 5 minutes from here, and I have a feature set here too. But just being able to make a film in a place where you're very familiar and you can kind of mine your memories for kind of like these little like nuggets of drama, I think is really fun. And like it feels like you're always like playing on home court in a way when you're on a set.
Yeah, I will say that your short gave me like trauma. Like I so many memories just like flash like, oh my God, those moments are too real.
I love that. I love that. That's it's funny because yeah, there's like this like shared trauma of like it's like, oh, I had to play an instrument for people, or like I'd have to go stand in front.
Yeah,
and especially as an actor, I'm sure like there's like dinners or stuff you've been to where it's like, oh yeah, like do something, like do a monologue or something.
They're not proud of you until they can show off. Like,
yeah,
so
exactly.
for a long time, like my parents weren't sure how to show off because like at the beginning, you haven't done anything that anyone has seen, right?
Yeah.
But once they figure that out, then it's like, oh yeah, this is the golden child.
Yeah, I'm sure they're like, oh, like just like bring their iPhone or iPad around, showing them, like, look, he's on the screen. There's the logo for the network on the bottom.
I think that's a very Asian thing. Like my mom is my biggest fan, and like often she'll like send me all these things, like articles, whatever about me. Like there's one time she's like, oh, have you seen this video? I'm like, Mom, that is clearly a video that I made that I put out there. Of course I've seen it, I created it, but she's like so excited to share it with me.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's awesome.
I like what you said about drinking too, like shots and like, how much to drink and how little to drink. Yeah, man, it's all.
And the white guy that speaks perfect Chinese. Yeah, I know those too.
Yeah. It's so funny because
that exists out there.
Yeah, it was funny how hard it was to find like especially like Mandarin speaking actors, but also like how much easier it was to find like white actors who could speak Mandarin, who had like gone to China to like take advantage of like that little boom of like, you know, I was like, yeah, we only have like 3 Chinese male actors, but we have like 10 white guys who can speak Mandarin. I was like, that's so weird how that's like a thing. But yeah, and they had all gone to China and like been in like movies and stuff. This is kind of a funny thing. Yeah.
I actually probably know more white actors that can speak Mandarin than Chinese actors.
Yeah. It's a funny thing.
Wow, I mean, I feel like the process and kind of like place-based conversation is surprising to me. And I think to maybe shift tax a little bit, which I didn't realize that might happen, is really getting into this idea of family, which we started talking about as well too. Families in across all 3 of your projects are not just, people you're related to. And I think even though there are, Johnson's Jurors takes place where some of the characters are children, a lot of your films, as well as like the ones in this program as a whole, sort of have this perspective of an adult kind of reflecting back there, or adult relationships with family members. And would just like to get your thoughts on, what might you want viewers to take away from your film, kind of related to those family relationships that we all have.
David,
feel free, anyone jump in.
Just about family, right? I mean, yeah, both of my both parts of the children were inspired by either my family or indirectly through my extended family. I have a huge extended family back in China, especially on my mom's side. So I grew up listening to her. She has 5 siblings. So just listening to her talk about her sibling dynamic and knowing my aunts and uncles, just added such a rich aspect to my childhood, and that's just something that I want. I think the ultimate goal is always to tell human stories, right? To like humanize people, to humanize us. And like, we want to eventually get to the point where we're just telling stories about us as, human beings of all trades and of all backgrounds. And so that's just kind of like how I wanted to approach it. And it's so great to see like all of us sort of approach this in different ways,
Yeah, I think, just to kind of go a little bit off, just about family in general, like this was an interesting process for me because, I shot in this area that also my family is really familiar with. And my parents being super curious, like wanted to come visit the set. And so, they came and they're actually in the short, like as like extras. That you can barely see them, but like they always point to the screen when like there's like the millisecond that like we pan past them. They're like having tea, and they're like very concerned about like, it's like, what kind of wardrobe should we wear? What kind of stuff should we wear? Am I like, dad's like trying to think about what watch to wear. I was like, we're not going to see any of that. But like it's just like a process where like they're really excited to be there. And I think, just for them to be there, and then like for them to see like me showing like putting like a small mirror on like these things that they were like, oh, we didn't even think you thought that was an interesting thing, or for them to be like, why would this be like interesting, like what's like so funny about this kind of thing. And I just have to explain to them like, you guys didn't think that was funny when like you guys like would like have these like weird kind of passive aggressive but like kind of like things with like all the business people at the table and all that, and then they're like, no, I think it's just like a part of like everyday life. But I think the thing that's interesting about family is like a lot of times like you hold certain things to yourself, and then other times you share those things, and then you are kind of like a different person with each member of your family. And then like whether you're in like a public or private situation, that can shift as well. So I was always interested in like, that's my favorite thing about filmmaking in general, just like figuring out the dramatic irony of like, it's like, what does the audience see in like each character's relationships as they are with other people in different spaces. I just thought it was a brilliant like kind of way to show kind of that kind of changing relationship and dynamic, because families are so just interesting, and they're so important to us as Asian American people. Like that's like our biggest thing, like Audrey, like your mom being your biggest fan. I think that's like so many of us can empathize with that, and I think that's also like a really cool thing to see.
Yeah, I think despite my mom's insistent that I do family friendly content, and like I used to do a lot of action stuff or horror stuff, and she's like, no, can't you just have a family about like a family, and they go to dinner, and I'm like, there's no conflict in that, Mom. And so like, as much as I've tried to do like everything else, I feel like I always come back to writing about a family. Like I never intended Good News to be about a family, right? I just had a conflict set up. I wanted that moment. And I guess this is probably one of the fun things about writing and directing, is that, I learn about myself and the stories that I'm trying to write as I go. And so like, the more I dove into it, the deeper I got, like the more I realized like, oh, this is really about my relationship with my parents, because they raised me a certain way. And I've spent my entire life trying to go the opposite way. Right. And so my values were, also they also raised me to go that way, in terms of being ambitious and going after those things and kind of neglecting the family, the important things. And then at some point, once you start succeeding, they're like, well, remember all these important things. I'm like, but you pushed me this way. And now they're like, well, this is more important. I'm like, then why'd you push so hard that way? And turns out they've been trying to do both. And so like this short really is Ryan, the main character. He goes in that direction only to realize what is truly important. And before I did this short, because I used to live in LA, also in the San Gabriel Valley, that's where we all live. But before making this short, I actually moved back to Vancouver because I realized how old my parents were getting, and that I was too far away from home, and it was the pandemic. I'm like, what? Like, that was the first time I actually felt like it didn't matter where I lived. And then the more I thought about it, I'm like, even if I had the choice, like I should be closer to my family, right? And so I moved back, and then I started doing this short, and then it just, like, the more I thought about it, I'm like, wow, this is just about me coming back home in terms, like, physically, but also in terms of my values. And like I could be the biggest, movie star, producer, whatever in the world, but it really wouldn't mean anything if I just missed out like all of this time with my parents, right? So I think it was a big learning experience, like just of myself in doing the film. And yeah, like family is such a big part of our culture. Even if we push it away, it's still like ingrained in us.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate all of your vulnerability. I know the question was just about kind of families in terms of what viewers take away, but it means a lot that you would all share something about your own individual families in all of your responses and connect that to your films. And sort of pivoting once again to a different topic, something else I wanted to cover is just sort of the production aspect of things. And so really wanted to get a sense of, was there like a big change from the beginning, first brainstorm or storyboarding to final cut, or if things are pretty, straightforwardly planned, maybe just any response related to like what was the timeline, kind of more of those process things. So feel free once again to just kind of speak up on either a big change that happened or maybe just about the timeline process in general.
I'll go. I think for mine, which are pretty location driven, just one location, very short time, almost real time. Over five minutes, each happens about 5 minutes. I mean, there was no location changes. I knew I was going to go at the river. I knew a specific point at the river I wanted to film at. Angel's Flight is obviously a pretty, well visited landmark in downtown LA. The timeline wise was about like, we just do pre-pro for about a month, or maybe a little less, and then I'd rehearse with the actors, and then we just go for it. But because I wanted it to feel almost like real time, each half of it, there was also like a little bit of a dialogue with nature almost. Just like, well, the sun's going to go down that hill, so we're probably going to grab one more take here, and we'll probably then have to wait until there's better lighting or whatever. So there's that, and I'm going to backtrack a little bit on the family aspect. It was cool working with the actors as well, because as Asian American actors, working with them was also a revelation, because when we talk about the beats and we talk about the subtext of each character's lines and everything, like they get it. We're also in it. Like we all have like our own experiences with our Asian families. So when it came to production day, we didn't need to do a lot of rehearsing. It was just literally like, all right, let's just walk through location once and we'll go for it. Traffic control was a little hard at English Flight, though, I'll say.
That's a great connection between kind of the production and also family theme aspects, and how so many of the folks you worked with really got it already. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that was really important for me too. Osric said earlier, like when you work with great actors, like a lot of times, like you actually don't have to do that much. Like the job is kind of like already there. And like for me, this was like my previous short that was all non-actors, and this time I was working with like people who had done it a lot. And I was working with the mom, Diana Lynn. She was someone who like just understood that character so well. We didn't really have to rehearse, I think when we got to set, I was just very specific about blocking, but aside from blocking, like I was like, I was like, you probably are already like, you are this character, you already know the character so well, just like, live in it. It was something that's like, I never had to explain anything. I think that's something you don't even have to like reach around to like help them access something. I think you just tell them who the character is, and then a lot of times they know. But yeah, for me, the location, I think, same with David, one location, that's like a rule that I set for myself for short films. I just said like any short I make, I'm just going to shoot in one location, because usually time is so limited. I just want to give myself that box. But I always try to think a lot about like shooting in that one space, like how to really utilize the exteriors and the interiors, and then the difference between like that location during the day and night, and then just like how time affects those things. For this one, because we're just in one spot, I can be really precise about the blocking. So a lot of times, like leading up to the shoot, we had pretty much like set all the marks for like where everyone's gonna go, and then like on the actual day, because we're choreographing like these long takes and like wides, the blocking has to be really precise. And by kind of just having them do it a ton of times, like we do a lot of takes, but because we're in few setups, it just makes it easier for them to find the groove. We can kind of calibrate things along the way. So we set a lot of time for people to get those takes in and to like get the blocking precise. But aside from that, like most dialogue, I let them kind of make up. Like a lot of the dialogue is improvised, because I know I'm terrible at writing dialogue. So I just kind of like say like, oh, this is kind of generally what you're gonna say, but just like pay attention to like the blocking, and then everything else can be kind of like what you think your character would say.
It's choreography. It's
Yeah.
choreography. You choreograph your films really well. So
Oh, thank you.
I will say I wish I had had this discussion with Johnson before I started. I wrote way too many locations. I was very ambitious. We shot in 3 different cities, 5 locations in 2 days. Like it is. I mean, I know every production, or the vast majority of productions, you're always short on time and resources. We are certainly no exception. And I think for me, directing in this case was more time management than it was anything else. I think being an actor's director, I was pretty terrible at that. I told them right at the beginning when we did a table read, I'm like, just so you know, we're gonna be really short on time. And so like, if you have any questions, like let me know now, like before the shoot, we can work these things out, and we can do all the rehearsals you want, but like on the day, like if you don't get it the first time, I'm gonna have to tell you exactly how we need it done. And then that will be the only other time we're gonna be able to do it before we move on. So we essentially had 1 or 2 takes for every single shot. And we just had to move because we're so low on time. And the whole thing kind of came to, like, we didn't even have much prep time, because the only reason why we shot it on the weekend that we did was because my actor was leaving for LA. And he was kind of the impetus that made it go. He's like, oh, by the way, I'm leaving in 2 weeks. I'm like, I guess we're doing it before that. And then we just kind of like, everything was kind of getting ready, but I guess initiating is always like such a hard thing, right? There's so many moving pieces, and we all, like myself included, we always drag our heels. And then at some point, some big enough thing just says, hey, we got to go now. Yeah. And then you go, and then for whatever reason, everything just kind of lines up, and then you just make it work. And so that happened. And so we had to prep it in like a 2-week span. And I was working on another show, so I was moonlighting on the short film, and it was kind of crazy. But next time I will definitely limit my locations. Because I love what you guys did. I'm like, oh, that's so simple. It's just like so pretty, like the shots that you set up. You could do the specials. Like I didn't really have time to do any special shots just because of times. And we had that's the problem. We had all the tools, but we didn't have the time to like use them properly. So I think it was definitely a big lesson in time management.
Well, speaking as a non-filmmaker, I will say for all of your films, as a viewer, they just seem so effortless, so put together. So I feel like to hear all these different behind the scenes details going on and considerations you have to make, it's really just cool to get insight on that from all of you. And so I think we're kind of closing in on our time together, but sort of my last quick question for everyone going around before I close out the Q&A is maybe if you want to share something you're working on right now, or any future projects on your horizon, could be filmmaking or otherwise.
I'll start. I had originally done this just to try directing. I didn't think I would like it that much, but honestly, I enjoyed it quite a bit. So I think I will probably continue writing with directing in mind. And so that's a pretty new endeavor. I have a couple of scripts that I've already like started re-looking at, not to act, but to direct. And weirdly enough, it changes a lot. Turns out I'm quite egotistical as an actor. So like, it's good. This is a good change for me.
That's awesome, man. I look forward to more of your work as a director, for sure.
Thank you, David.
Having seen your work as an actor, I think it's very much looking forward to it. On my end, I'm working currently as a writer for Imagine Entertainment for Ron Howard, Brian Grader's company. I'm just working on some co-productions between the U.S. and Asia as a writer. But in terms of individual projects, I am working on a feature that's also set in the San Gabriel Valley. Shout out Johnson and Nazareth, who you said you were a former resident, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, because the place is just magical. It's just like there's so much magic in the mundane here, and I don't know if I'm biased because I grew up here, but like there's a lot I think that can be told about so many different kinds of characters. So that's something I'm working on. And yeah, no, just taking it day by day and like trying to let the creative juices just kind of like, continue running.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to see that film. You know, it's always great to like anytime I hear about something being shot here, I'm always like trying to I don't know, it's like how can I help or like can I try to see it at some point, whether it's like a short or a feature. There actually is, you know, more and more stuff being made out here. So I was looking forward to that. I have you know, a feature that I'm writing out here too. I have a book that I'm adapting to make into a feature. And then I've been wanting to direct TV for the longest time. This year I'll get to do that for the first time. So trying to really get more TV directing in there. It's just a craft that I was always really excited about. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Wonderful.
Maybe
Well,
we can all
thank
work together one day. That's dope.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And congrats on your first TV gig, Johnson. That's so exciting.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I remember we were talking about this at the last VC Film Fest. That you were-
Yeah. I was
Yeah.
like,
That's awesome.
man, hopefully one day. But yeah, thank you.
And thank all of you for taking the time to do this Q&A together for all of our SAAFF viewers. Addressing the viewers now, thank you so much for joining the 10th Seattle Asian American Film Festival. We greatly appreciate your support for our festival and community. If you have not done so already, please take a moment to fill out our festival survey. There's a link in your confirmation email. Data from surveys help us get grants and sponsorships that make the festival possible, and it's another way that you can support SAAFF. Check out our other programs at seattleaaff.org. Tickets are still available, and on behalf of the festival, thank you so much for watching.